Let's dive right into this explainer, because today we are tackling the absolute ultimate origin story. We're going to zoom all the way out to the literal birth of the universe, and then trace this wild 14 billion year journey right down to the biology of, well, you and me. I mean, think about it. It really is the most profound mystery we could possibly ask, right? Where did everything come from? We can't just guess here. We have to essentially become cosmic detectives, investigating the hard scientific clues left behind in the stars, the rocks, and incredibly, inside our very own DNA. So here is our cosmic itinerary for this journey. First up, the Big Bang, then forming our solar system. Number 3, the origins of life, followed by chemical evolution and the Miller-Urey experiment. Then we'll look at the mechanism of evolution, and finally, the hard evidence all around us.
Okay, starting out at the widest possible lens, let's hit section 1, the Big Bang.
Just try to wrap your head around the massive scale of this timeline for a second. 13.8 billion years ago, literally all matter and energy in existence were packed into this tiny, intensely hot singularity. And then, boom, the Big Bang. Space and time expanded outward, eventually forming billions of galaxies. Fast forward about 9 billion years, and our own solar system and Earth finally start to really take shape.
Which brings us perfectly to our own cosmic neighborhood in section 2, forming our solar system. Now, the nebular hypothesis is really our best explanation for how we got here. Basically, gravity caused this massive swirling cloud of gas and dust to just collapse in on itself. The vast majority of that material clumped together right in the center to form our sun, while the leftover debris spun around it, constantly crashing and merging together until it formed the planets. But early Earth was definitely not the beautiful blue marble we know today. Initially, it was an extremely hot, completely molten rock. I'm talking no atmosphere, 0 oceans, and absolutely no free oxygen. It was an incredibly hostile environment where life literally could not exist. But over a really long time, the Earth gradually started cooling down. The heavier elements, like iron, sank down to form the core, and the lighter stuff formed the crust. And crucially, water vapor finally condensed and poured down, eventually forming the very first oceans. And man, those massive bodies of water really set the stage for a profound transformation.
Which begs the question, how exactly did a lifeless, cooling rock suddenly spark living organisms? Let's get into section 3, the origins of life. Humanity debated this exact question for centuries. The early ideas, well, they varied wildly. You had Aristotle famously championing spontaneous generation, this idea that life just magically popped out of non-living matter. Like, frogs just appearing from mud. Modern science obviously rejected that. Then there was Panspermia, which suggested life hitched a ride here on meteorites. Pretty cool, but still unproven. Ultimately, the scientific community landed on chemical evolution, which proposes that life actually formed through very gradual chemical changes right here on early Earth.
But how do we actually go about proving something like that? Well, let's look at section 4, chemical evolution and Miller-Urey.
Back in 1953, the Miller-Urey experiment provided this absolute breakthrough. Scientists Stanley Miller and Harold Urey essentially built early Earth right in a bottle. They took primitive inorganic gases, methane, ammonia, hydrogen, and water vapor, and they literally zapped them with electric sparks to simulate early Earth's lightning storms. And guess what? After just 1 week, they found something mind-blowing: simple organic molecules. They basically proved that the building blocks of life could form entirely organically. Now, those simple amino acids, they were just step 1. Over immense spans of time, these simple molecules started linking up to form much more complex molecules, things like proteins and RNA. Eventually, they grouped together into what are called coacervates, which actually had lifelike properties. This incredibly long, complex chemical dance led to the very first simple cells. And since Earth still didn't have any free oxygen, these pioneer cells were completely anaerobic, meaning they survived entirely without it. Okay, so we have simple cells, but how do we get from that to the incredible diversity of plants, animals, and, well, us? That brings us to section 5, the mechanism of evolution. Charles Darwin, who we all know as the father of evolution, explained this brilliant mechanism, and it's actually a super logical step-by-step process. First off, organisms produce way more offspring than can possibly survive, and naturally, those individuals show slight variations.
Because resources in nature are always limited, there is an intense struggle for existence, which leads directly to step 3, natural selection. The individuals that happen to have the most favorable variations for their environment are the ones who survive. They then pass those advantageous traits down to their offspring. Over many, many generations, all those tiny accumulated changes lead to speciation, which is the formation of completely new species from pre-existing ones. And the coolest part is, we don't just have to guess that this happened over millions of years. The proof is literally right here with us today. Let's look at section 6, evidence all around us. If you look closely at the bone structure of a human arm and then compare it to a whale flipper or even a bat wing, you'll see something amazing. They obviously perform totally different functions today, but structurally, they share the exact same internal bone layout. These are called homologous organs, and it's a massive indicator that they all evolved from a common ancestor. On the flip side, you have analogous organs. Think about the wings of a bird versus the wings of an insect. They do the exact same job, flying, but they have completely different internal structures, which tells us they actually evolved completely independently of one another. It gets even more fascinating when you realize our own bodies actually hold biological blueprints of our past in the form of vestigial organs. These are organs that have literally lost their original function over the course of evolution. I mean, you have them right now. Your appendix, your coccyx, which is just your tailbone, even your wisdom teeth. They really don't do much for us today, but their presence is basically a giant neon sign pointing right back to our evolutionary past, proving we evolved from ancestors who actively needed and used those parts. And honestly, the evidence just stacks up everywhere you look. Look at early development, vertebrate embryos, all the way from fish up to mammals. They all mysteriously share things like gill slits and a tail early on. Even on a microscopic level, incredibly diverse organisms share remarkably similar DNA, proteins, and enzymes. And of course, right beneath our feet, the fossil record preserves the actual physical timeline. We've even found these amazing connecting links, like the Archaeopteryx, which is basically a creature caught right in the act of evolution, showing distinct traits of both reptiles and birds. In the end, it really all comes back to this famous phrase, survival of the fittest. Now, interestingly enough, while it perfectly summarizes Darwin's whole theory of natural selection, Darwin didn't actually say it first. A scientist named Herbert Spencer coined that specific term. But it honestly distills the whole mechanism down beautifully. The organisms best adapted to their specific environment are just the ones most likely to survive and reproduce. Which leaves us with this final, honestly mind-boggling thought. Knowing that you and I are the current results of 13.8 billion years of nonstop transformation, starting from a hot, dense singularity to cosmic dust to primitive oceans and finally to incredibly complex life, what adaptations will shape our future? Evolution is a very slow, continuous process, right? So as our environment inevitably changes, what will the next million years of human evolution actually look like? Just keep that in the back of your mind the next time you look up at the stars, or honestly, even just look in the mirror. Thanks so much for exploring these incredible origins with me today.